Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. I have that it is 12 o'clock noon, so we are going to go ahead and get started. I am Corey Hill from the Partnership for People with Disabilities at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I want to welcome you to our part 2, our November Talks on Tuesday, Equity and Early Intervention, Looking Outward. We hope that many of you enjoyed us and many of you joined us in October for part 1, which was looking inward. If you were not able to, you did get information about the link to that, so you can watch that another time. And again, today we're going to be looking outward. With that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to our 2 wonderful presenters who are going to introduce themselves, and I will be back at the end of the Talks on Tuesday. So Barbara and Leah, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise with us, and I will let you all take it away. Thanks.
Thanks, Corey. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see so many familiar faces in the chat and unfamiliar faces. So hello, just like Corey said, we're going to be talking about equity and early intervention. Today is our part 2 of our series. It's about looking outward. My name is Barbara Grant-Moneta, and I have Leah Davidson here with me as well. So before we jump into it, we're just going to talk about why us? Why are we here, right? Why are we talking about equity? You might have noticed that we are both pretty white. Look at him, yeah. So why are these 2 white ladies talking to us about what equity looks like in early intervention? So we're here to tell you. Again, my name is Barbara. I have worked in early intervention for over 10 years at this point. Worked in Virginia and DC, and am now located in Austin, Texas. But my why has more to do with where I come from. So I was born in Mexico. Have a lot of family there, grew up in California, and essentially grew up and am raising right now a fully bilingual, bicultural child. Yeah, so we speak Spanish at home. We're very in tune with our Mexican traditions, as well as how to integrate that with Mexican American traditions. And when I was providing direct services and doing service coordination and therapy and assessments and all of that in early intervention, probably around 2014, 2015, closer to 2016. So you guys can all think about what was happening in 2016. I started paying attention more to this idea of equity, to how we were treating, particularly for me, folks that didn't speak English, how we maybe were treating them differently, how our biases were showing up, and just started looking a lot into this work and became very interested in how it looks in early intervention. I'll pass it to Leah to talk a little bit about your why.
Wonderful. Thanks, Barbara. My name is Leah Davidson. I have been in early intervention since 2009, first in the state of Virginia. So nice to be back in Virginia today virtually. And now I'm in the Part C system in New Mexico. And as Barbara explained, I am also a white person, as you can, I'm sure, tell. And my why is similar to lots of people's why, I think, and it is really about where I come from and my experiences coming up. So I am somebody who was born in Pittsburgh. I was born in the late 1970s, and intentional integration was happening during my childhood, and my parents were invested in making sure that we got sent to an integrated school. And so that meant getting bused across town into a neighborhood that I didn't live in. So I had the benefit of very close proximity to Black and brown children as a white child. So I say proximity because the effort was to integrate us, meaning we were together side by side, but we were not actually encouraged to talk to each other. So still there was a lot of segregation that happened within the school. So I wouldn't say I got a fully immersive experience, but I did get proximity, which then when I moved away from Pittsburgh and met white people that had grown up not in proximity to people of color, felt some differences in the way we used language. Not that I was using it in the right way. I was never taught any of that. I had to learn it all in my 30s. But I always was like, boy, white people need a way to talk about being white as opposed to being another color, literally, in this country. And it wasn't until I was 30 that I read a book by a guy named Mark Matabane from South Africa that talks about his experience growing up in apartheid South Africa, and his wife, he married an American white woman who I then read her book, and she was the first person that gave any language about what it is to be white in this country. And so I, started to try to reconcile that with the injustices that I had seen and sort of witnessed as a child. And that sort of started my journey into thinking about that as I began my early childhood career. And in early intervention, I also was wondered, how are we treating kids of color? Because I saw how they were treated in school, and I know about this thing about white people often not having really had to consider race. So what does that mean for us? So that is why I'm here. I continue to study that today.
Great. So hopefully you guys all can kind of think about your why as well, why you continue coming to topics like this. And as you're thinking about that, I want us to hold this idea in mind as we go throughout this entire presentation, is that you are never going to be an expert, right? In fact, that's one of the strategies, one of the ideas that we give people when you're doing this work is to resist becoming an expert. This is forever work, right? So it is okay to make mistakes. It's okay to continue learning. It's okay to take this in bite-sized pieces. The trick is to keep going, right? So little by little is okay. Again, keep going though, right? Keep learning, keep knowing in that there is always going to be more to learn and that you're never going to be an expert, right? Leah and I, not experts.
No.
All your DEI consultants, not experts, right? Just people that are helping facilitate these conversations, okay? So hopefully you guys were able to attend part one, just like Corey was saying. If not, go ahead and check it out, find that link. But a couple questions that we want you to go ahead and reflect on before we jump in is, one, what did you learn about yourself? And two, how has your learning impacted your thinking or practice? Okay, so no need to type it in the chat or to share, but one of the things that is important about this work is not just learning, but it's doing, right? And so that's why it's important to be allowed to make mistakes, is that you got to practice it. You can't just read books. You can't just attend presentations like this. You've got to actually do, right? So go ahead and start thinking about that. How has your learning impacted your practice, your thinking, plans that you've made about what you want to do, things like that. Okay.
And now, as you're thinking about that, I want to just bring us back and ground us in an important theory that was, I know, talked about in session 1, which is Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory, which I know many of you are familiar with. It's just this theory that this idea that we live within systems. And today's presentation is shifting us from looking in to looking out. So what we're going to do today is invite you to be detectives, right? So detectives are generally not experts on what they're looking for. They're like forever learners. And so that is all you're invited to do today, is begin to look for the way that inequitable outcomes show up within systems and as a result of systems. So Bronfenbrenner's theory is that we live in like a series of concentric circles. Your microsystem is you and the people closest to you. And then each system, it gets larger and larger, with the chronosystem, sort of the outside universe, being our historical time, what's happening in the world, our macro system being our systems of government, the systems that create policies that we all operate under. And that gets closer and closer to us as we get to our microsystem. So I want us to just think about systems for a couple minutes here, and just think about like the fact that system has a definition, system is a specific thing, and it has a profound influence on our lives. Next slide. Okay, so these are two Merriam-Webster definitions of systems. The first is a regularly interacting or interdependent group of items forming a unified whole. And the second is a form of social, economic, or political organization or practice. And the reason I wanted to ground us in these definitions is that there is this myth, I think, that is sort of unwritten. It's like unwritten myth that floats around in our collective consciousness, that systems are independent of people, that they are their own thing and they're set up in some way that we really can't get our hands around, and they just exist like in a silo, separate from us. And that is very not true, as I know all of you, when we think on it, we know that, right? Systems are set up by people. Systems are made by people who, when they're making them, have a specific idea about the world in mind. So our systems, the thing that makes them feel intractable and big and hard to change is that they are large. And they're like machines in terms of once they get rolling, they can be hard to shift. But just because something is hard to shift doesn't mean we can't shift it. It just means that we have to work together to consciously shift it, right? In sometimes little nudges. A lot of times it's not sweeping change, it's just little nudges. And so I think that one thing we're going to focus on today is that a system can get built, and unless and until the worldview of the people operating it changes, it will remain as it is. Next slide, please. I love this quote. I'm going to tell a teeny story. So when I came here to New Mexico, trying to learn the workforce, and I was actually not working in the Part C system yet. I was working in another role, and I was just kind of like a sponge trying to learn. And at the time I came here, this beautiful thing was happening where the governor had just signed into law this incredible bill that created a cabinet level department just dedicated to early childhood. I was like, oh Lord, this is so great. I'm so lucky. I have waited my whole career to have something like this. It's so cool. All of us are under one roof. And I was listening to the newly appointed cabinet secretary speak to us who were going to be this new department. And she used this quote. And I was like, oh, yes. Every system is designed to get the results it gets. Right now, I'm prioritizing sleep because I'm tired. And therefore, I don't do anything but get dressed and go to work in the morning. And so I have built that system because I'm tired. And then I'm mad because I don't work out in the morning. But in fact, the system I've built, which is hitting the snooze button for 17 times, is perfectly designed to just let me get dressed and get out the door. So we consciously and unconsciously, but more consciously than we think, design our systems to get the results they get. And then when we're like, why are our outcomes so bad? We accidentally look at individuals and we don't then look back at the system. So we say things like, well, they're just not engaged. Okay, but the system is designed to help them not be engaged, right? So this takes some, thinking like this takes some mind shifting. Next slide.
Okay, so we're going to get a little wild here now. We are going to do an activity right now, and we're essentially going to make a word cloud. So if you go ahead and click on the link that Seth has put in the chat, you are going to be prompted. It's going to ask you for your name and things like that. You can skip that. But we want you to type in a few examples of the systems in which you operate. Okay. So once again, the link to this word cloud is in the chat. Go ahead and click on that link. write in your response. And then once we get a few responses, I will have a lovely word cloud for us. So give everyone a little bit of time to go ahead and be able to click on that link. Just a reminder, you're going to go ahead and answer, provide a few examples of the systems in which we operate. And yes, Seth wrote, please keep your submission to a word or two. That way we don't have like really long sentences in your word cloud.
I do love a word cloud. It's like watching cookies bake in the oven.
Yeah. So let's see if people started coming in. Whoa.
Ooh, wow. That's a
Yeah.
good varied cookie.
Oh, I love how it keeps moving. Yeah. So definitely family is the biggest one. So if we're thinking of our Brothenrenner, we're starting with our small system. Confusion. I just saw confusion as the first one. That is a system. It's just a confusing system. Or maybe you're confused right now. I don't know. But we can go ahead and answer. But family, community, school, local system managers, church, schools, motherhood, state, government. Those are just some of the ones that are standing out for me. So you guys got it, right? You're absolutely right that these are some of the systems in which we operate. And just like you guys see here, we operate under a lot of systems, right? So definitely we start parent, mother, family, and then kind of grow from there. So let's keep going.
Can we actually stay on this for 1 second? Because I just want to notice something. It looks like the ecological model with the smallest system in the middle. That's so cool. I do want to remind us all that every outer system directly affects the system right under it.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see if I can get off of this page. 1 second.
Not possible.
I think we did very well with the word cloud, but now we just want to leave it there. Okay. And just to continue with our activities, now we're going to ask you to go ahead and use the stamp feature, which Seth is going to explain to you in a moment, to go ahead and stamp where your sphere of influence is in your professional life, right? So within early intervention, where is your sphere of influence? What systems are you able to influence? I think this is really important. This is why we wanted to talk about looking outward, because it's important to kind of see what is in your control right now, right? So one of the things about systems is that we've been made to think that individuals can affect the big systems, and you can, but not without getting a big group of people together and making kind of communal efforts, right? So again, important to know where your sphere of influence is when you're doing this sort of work. Go ahead, Lisa.
So I think that before I go into this Robin DiAngelo quote, I want to say one quick thing about influence. Influence is a real tool for change. And so it doesn't mean that you have to influence a whole system, but we really soak each other up. And so if you just simply start looking for inequitable or mechanisms in your system that may be producing inequitable outcomes, that is going to have an influence on the people around you. And that is how you get a group together to change a larger system. So just doing some detective work is an act of resistance and an act of change. So let's talk about white supremacy culture. Well, first of all, we're going to define what white supremacy is. Robin DiAngelo is a researcher and an expert on particularly white racial identity in the US. And so this is how she defines white supremacy. White supremacy is not simply the idea that whites are superior to people of color, although it certainly is that, but a deeper premise that supports this idea. The definition of whites as the norm or standard for human, and people of color as inherent deviation from that norm. So it's uncomfortable for me to read those words because it feels like I'm speaking them from my own mind. But the reason that's uncomfortable is because I'm a white person and I didn't have to live the other end of this. I still don't. I don't have to live under an assumption that I am a deviation, right? And so I began considering this and really walking around in this in my 30s. But I'm very aware that people of color are walking around in it all day, and it is a very different experience. So I want to really highlight this idea that whites are superior to people of color is the idea that our country was built on. That's how this country got built, by colonizing indigenous people, literally stealing their land, murdering people, and it got built by forcing African people to get on a boat and come here and build a country for free. And the way we justified that is by saying whites are superior to people of color. We may know, we said it in our Constitution, we said it in our laws, we said it in lots of different ways, and it got baked into our system. And it's easy to think like, oh, this is just that only the KKK believes this. And the KKK does. They're an extreme example. But all of our systems have enacted this reality. And it's our job to soak this in and let it make us uncomfortable enough to become a detective and interrupt the cycles that we begin to see. Next slide. Want to give you a little historical background here. This image, I love this image because it reminds us that when one very common phrase to hear someone say, or say yourself or think yourself, is slavery was so long ago, we're not like that anymore. We had the civil rights movement. Why can't we just start again? This is why. Because most of our life as a country, we have been overtly stopping Black and brown people from acquiring property, being safe, living in a world that sees them as equally human. We had slavery and segregation for most of our time. And free is in air quotes. Well, they're not air quotes, they're quotes, but the idea that freedom has been achieved is incorrect. That is a misnomer. So it's not a long time ago. It's a little time ago, and we're still living under systems that were built when the people in power were firmly planted in white supremacy. Next slide. Okay, so I won't explain what these specific systems are. You can Google them. You can take a snip of this picture if you're not sure. These are things we all should have learned about in school, but a lot of us didn't. I for sure did not. These are things I learned about when I was an adult, had to seek them out on my own. So when we think about that timeline that I just showed, and we think about the fact that systems are created by people with a specific worldview, and our people had a specific worldview, and I would argue still have a specific worldview, that white people are superior to people of color. These are some of the systems that were put in place by that worldview. And they were all things that made it illegal or impossible for Black and brown people to gain wealth, access education, and be safe on the streets. Okay. So now I want to land a little bit on this very interesting study. I don't know, can I have a show of hands? Who, if you could raise your hand, am I going to see raised hands? No, I probably am not. I don't think I will. It's fine. In the chat, if you have heard of Walter Gilliam's study on teachers looking for challenging behavior, say it in the chat. Okay, Kara, Corey, some other people. I better just pull up the chat. You know, we've been on Zoom for how many years? Okay, lots of people. That's
Yeah, it
awesome.
looks like a few people.
Okay, perfect. So
Great.
I will not then go into too much detail, but I want to put it in context for early intervention. So for those of you that have not read the study or heard about it, in 2016, a early childhood researcher at Yale University basically gathered a group of early childhood teachers, preschool teachers, and told them to watch a video of 4 kids and look for challenging behavior. So what he was doing was find where the challenging behavior is going to happen and identify for me which child is going to engage in it. So they're looking and they're looking, and the kids at the table are a black boy, a black girl, a white boy, and a white girl. And what Dr. Gilliam's team is doing is tracking the eyeballs of the teachers to see where they are looking the longest. In other words, where are they looking for the challenging behavior? The thing to know is that these 4 kids are hired actors. There is no challenging behavior to be found. There's no one's doing anything. So the reason to have it that way is to see, without any challenging behavior happening, where are the teachers looking for it? And what they found was that teachers looked more at children of color. The eyes stayed the longest at the black boy, the second longest at the black girl, the third longest at the white boy, and the fourth longest at the white girl. One of the things we know in US culture around whiteness is that white women are often seen as innocent and in need of protection, and black men and boys are often seen as dangerous and in need of restraint. And that we see this play out here in preschool. We also know that black boys get expelled from, I'm talking about babies, like babies to 5-year-olds get expelled at a way higher rate than anybody else. The black children get expelled at a higher rate, but particularly black boys. When the teacher and the child's race were the same in the debrief, right? So like there was a long debrief. They also dug into some research regarding severity of punishment disaggregated by race. And one of the findings was that if the teacher and the child were the same race, the teacher had a less severe reaction to the child's behavior, meaning maybe wouldn't get expelled or sent home so often. If the race was different, the reaction was more severe. This is particularly dangerous for our kids of color because most teachers, early childhood teachers in America, are white. But most and a little like a majority of kids who are in preschool are not white. So already we have that race difference that presents this challenge of teachers having really their unconscious bias play a dangerous role. One of the things that this study speaks to is something known as the preschool to prison pipeline, where there's a lot of research behind that shows that expulsion in the young years puts a child at much greater risk for dropping out of school and making choices that land them in the prison system. But those choices that they make are choices within an extremely narrow system that is already set up to not benefit them, right? So as we look at this, I know this happened in preschool, but this has major implications for early intervention because we are not exempt from the same internal biases that guide teachers' behavior in the early intervention world. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I think and I know we're going to get into it a little bit. I think the other thing is that a good majority, I don't know if it's exactly majority, but a good amount of our children are seen in preschool or childcare settings.
Yes.
Right. So if you have looked at that study before and been like, well, that doesn't really apply. It does. not, it does because we are in early education, right? Early childhood education as early interventionists, but also a lot of our students are in that environment, right? So kind of a double-edged sword there.
It is a double-edged sword. And if a child is getting to kindergarten, already have been given the message that school is not for them, that's a bad thing. We don't want that for our kids. That our systems are clearly set up to allow that to happen way too often. So I want to share some data with you. This data was shared at the Division of Early Childhood Conference that I had the honor to attend this September in Chicago. And it's some really interesting research, I think. So a couple of findings they shared were that Black, Latinx, and Native American children are less likely to be served in early intervention, less likely to be served in preschool special education, and more likely to be served in K-12 special education. So that is a really concerning data point to me. They disaggregated the data even a little bit more. So there are some patterns that they found where, in terms of less likely to be served, for Part C in particular, could mean not identified. Absolutely, there was a lack of identification. One thing we know is that when Black families visit the doctor, they are less likely to be listened to about their concerns. This comes from a long history of the medical system being set up to ignore Black pain and the concerns of Black people. So that can lead to the not identification part of things. The other way you cannot be served is because to use a term that I've definitely used before and I've heard in early intervention, fell off the map, or we lost contact with the parent. And we often think, oh, well, the parent was just not engaged. We can't force families to engage. But I think our system in some ways might be set up to not be as helpful to Black and brown families. And so we end up losing them. And that is something that we need to change at the system level. Because if we have less access for Black and brown children to early intervention, and then an overrepresentation of Black and brown children in special education later, that is a real indication of the system not working. Next slide. Okay, I'm checking time because I'm a rambler, as many of you know. Okay, inequities in special education. So some more data that was shared, which I thought was really valuable for us, is that Black children with disabilities are more likely to be identified under the intellectuals with disabilities or emotional disturbance educational category than white children, and are more likely to receive a disciplinary removal than all other children with disabilities. So we see this pattern in preschool and now playing out where we're having our Black children be expelled over and over again. So like if a Black child is expelled or removed from preschool over and over again and then gets into school and then this happens to them, that does not send them a message that school is for them. It sends them the opposite message. And then when we look at white children, more likely to receive special education in an inclusive setting. And we know what a difference inclusive settings make for individuals, for people. Less likely to be identified with intellectual disability than all other children with disabilities. This is directly correlated with our perceptions, which are highly influenced by the system that has been set up by people that very recently that really embody a white supremacy viewpoint. So we're seeing those ideas play out in our education system. Next slide.
Yeah, and the reason also that we focus on race and particularly Black children is because that's where you see the most drastic inequities, right? The biggest differences. It does not mean that there are other identities and different intersections and
Mhm.
different layers to this, but just know that is the reason why we focus on Black children, is because that is where the biggest inequities are seen. And so the thinking is, when we are able to kind of focus on those kiddos and be able to provide them with more equitable services, that we're able to do that with other identities as well.
Yeah, that's right.
These are some of my favorites. Go ahead.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about one of many, but if we had like all day, we could talk about multiple elements of white supremacy culture and white supremacy thinking. But we're going to focus on one today because it's really relevant to early intervention. And I want to talk about individualism. So individualism, will define it, but it is a major part and core value of white supremacy thinking. So individualism is the idea that each person can achieve whatever they want to achieve, regardless of the people or systems around them. So it's this idea that the playing field is level, and if people just do right, they will succeed, right? Individualism allows us to think that racism is in individual people, not in society. And so all a person of color would need to do to avoid to avoid racism is just avoid individual racist people, and then they'll be fine. This is false. It is very, very untrue. It is a thing white people made up so that we did not have to contend with the reality that we were breaking bodies in order to build this country, quite literally. So the problem with it is that, and that it's baked into our thinking. Individualism is a very heavy American ideal. I mean, we consider ourselves an individualist country. We are all about sort of individual freedom and individual rights. All of these things, all of these things alone are great, but when they're used in order to deny the clear abuse and oppression of other people, they're not okay, right? So individualism in early intervention. Let's talk about that for a sec. So individual, you can go ahead and switch the slide. If we think about individualism, the way it influences our practice, we certainly do have a very strong value for individualization of services for each child. I want to be clear. I am not saying that that is wrong. That's a core component of IDEA. I love individualizing. It's a core component of early childhood special education at large, and it is actually a principle that undergirds equity. Because individualism, what we mean really is everyone gets what they need instead of everyone getting the same. Because if you have a child with an IFSP in a childcare setting, we want to give them what they need so that they have full participation in the classroom or full participation in their family life. But it's a tricky wicket, because also we're in America and this country got built with these specific values that have done a lot of intentional harm. So what we have to do as early interventionists is think about, if we only focus on individualization, if we only focus on the individual family, what might we be missing that has informed the way they have come to make decisions about child rearing?
So we're actually going to take a little bit of time to talk about that. We're going to break into rooms. So go ahead and we can go ahead and put that question in the chat. Or you can go ahead and take a picture of it with your phone. But we're going to break you up into groups of about 3 to 4. You're right. It says 2 to 3 minutes. It's actually going to be 5 to 7 minutes. So 2 to 3 minutes is just not enough time. So 5 to 7 minutes for you guys to talk a little bit about that idea of individualism in early intervention, and what it looks like, right? What we're missing when we do that. Okay. So I'm going to let Seth break us up into rooms.
Yep, I'll do that in just a second. You
Thank
should
you.
receive a prompt to be put in a breakout room. And then if you do not, then we'll figure out how to get you into a room.
And it's 12:42 I have, so around 12:48, let's say. We'll bring you all back, and you do not have to share to the big group, so no worries. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So I know I said you didn't have to share, but if you had any aha moments or anything that came up, we'd love for you to go ahead and type in the chat anything that was particularly interesting, insightful, that you think would be helpful for the group. So go ahead and take a second and go ahead and write if you had anything you'd like to share, any aha moments from that quick little breakout, and go ahead and put it into chat. So I'll start reading some of them as they come in. Susan wrote that authentic assessment allows you to better consider all of family's experiences. Yes, we love authentic assessment. Anyone else? Specifically with how it relates to early intervention. It's okay if you're still processing it. One of the things for me that always comes up is how we work with kiddos with autism. I think that's a really interesting one. So hopefully somebody talked about that and just different modalities that we use for kids with autism. Individualization can and should mean that you are looking at everything that impacts that family unit. Yeah, absolutely. That is, we talk about treating every family as if they have their own unique culture and holding like their whole family and historical context in both hands at the same time.
I think that one of the things that I really like that comment, individualization, looking at everything. I think one helpful tool to help us do that is actually using the ecological model and thinking about what is happening in the chrono system. And we saw this when I remember still working in Virginia in 2016 when the extreme immigration policies and laws came into place and the mass exodus of families. That was a direct result of the larger system really impacting family decision-making about engaging with early intervention.
And I see Tracy wrote, yes, a deep dive into the social determinants of health for child and family. Yeah. And I think that / is really important, right? Child and family.
Yeah.
And I think also, and we've talked about this, I know in other talks on Tuesdays, it has been brought up, but also, again, holding the and, right? Not making assumptions based on the social determinants of health, but holding them in your mind, which is a tricky balance. Okay. Leah, it was about to talk.
No, it's okay. No, let's keep going.
Okay, we're gonna do one more activity to wrap us up. Okay, you're gonna go ahead and use your stamp again. And what we want you to do is go ahead and stamp if you have ever said, heard, thought, think other people thought some of these things within early intervention, right? So phrases such as, I can't control whether people want to be in our program or not. It's open to everybody who's eligible. Yeah. So these phrases are helpful to look at, and it's helpful to see that there are stamps on all of these, right? So these are things that have been said or have been thought in early intervention. So again, think back to the beginning of this, right? It's not our expectation that you are perfect. It's not our expectation that these thoughts don't come up.
No.
It's what you do after, right? It's taking a moment to pause if you hear someone say this, if the thought comes up in your head, and take a second and be like, whoa, where did that come from? Right? And really then reflect on where did that come from? Right? What in me made that thought come up? what kind of discussion can I have with someone else about where that statement came from? Okay. And that's what it's about, right? And those are the baby steps that we take. And that's how we do this work, is that when our biases, because that's what these thoughts are, come up, what do we do about them? Do we stop and ignore them? Or do we do, just like Leah said before, a little detective work? And that detective work is what's gonna help us get out of it, right? I love what Corey just said in the chat. She once heard, practice the cause to pause. Yeah, we love pauses here. Leah and I are big proponents of the cognitive pause. So always.
Mhm.
And that's it for us. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here. We know this is a tough but important topic, and we'd love to keep chatting about it. So yeah, we're here.
Yeah.
We're here to chat. Corey, take it
Yes.
away.
Thank you. I want to thank Barbara and Leah for such a rich topic. I hope that between our October, which was Megan Schumacher Murphy and Barbara and Leah, you are getting some food for thought to think about where you want to go with this journey that we are all on. I want to also remind you that our next Talks on Tuesday is December 6th, where Dana Yarbrough from the Partnership for People with Disabilities at the Center for Family Involvement is going to be talking about family recharge. But a quick sneak peek about what you experienced today. We, Barbara, Leah, Megan, and I have talked about this is truly a journey, not something you can do in a one-shot Talks on Tuesday. We all know that there are more things we would like to be able to do. So we're excited. For those of you who participated, you're getting a little insider view. We are going to be offering an equity and early intervention echo in 2023. Information is being built and planned as we speak. I will kind of give everybody the heads up that it's going to be a small group, because we really want it to be an intimate opportunity for you all to continue on your own personal journey. So it will be open to the first 30 people who register, but you guys are hearing it first. So watch for the email blast when we do that in early 2023, if you are interested in getting registered. So as we wrap up today, I want to remind you that probably as soon as you hang up today, check your inbox. There will be a survey to give us feedback about today's presentation. When you complete that survey, you will have access to the certificate of participating today. So I want to thank everybody and honor your time that it is 1 o'clock. And so we are going to wrap up. I will stay on for just another minute or two, and we'll be checking chat. If anybody has any specific questions, I'm happy to try to field those in chat. So have a good afternoon. And again, thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you on December 6th for our next Talks on Tuesday.